welcome to Yin Yoga. We're gonna slow down and get really deep into some poses. We're gonna mostly focus on things that impact our hips and our spine tonight. So you might want a few props, some things that are soft. I have a blanket. I have access to a couple other blankets nearby in case I want them. Usually one is enough for me, especially if it's warm, like it is here today. And I don't know that I'm gonna wanna cover up with a big blanket at the end. So one blanket is usually gonna be enough for me on a warm day. But if your place is a little chillier, you might want two. I also have a pillow. I have access to more pillows, and I have some yoga blocks. And yoga blocks are kind of firm. And for the purposes of what we're gonna do tonight, you may not need anything firm. Some pillows, some rolled up towels, something like that might be all you need to support your knees. But if you do have yoga blocks, they're handy because you can use them a lot of different ways. So just have them nearby. So that's what we've got. We're gonna start in a butterfly pose. And if you're willing, we're gonna start lying down. Now, if for whatever reason you need to start sitting up, you can do the butterfly with your feet together, fold over. And then at the end of this pose, you can join us on our back because we'll do a twist laying on our back. And that part you could probably do lying down. You could also do that seated. So if there's any, like if you're really congested because of it's spring here, maybe you're allergic to the planet, you can certainly adjust how you lie down. You can make a little slope out of pillows so your head's a little higher. I'm gonna do a pillow down my back so that I've got, mine's gonna be level, but you could easily prop yours up so it's a little higher, and then that will keep you from, becoming overwhelmed. And then I'm gonna take my blanket, roll it up, and that'll go underneath my thighs to help to support my knees. Okay. I rearranged my space and turned all my plants, and I might run into leaves because I'm not used to where they stick out these days. Okay, so I've got my blanket right up by my hips. You might prefer your blanket or pillows or whatever you're using to support your knees, if you're using anything, closer to the knee or the ankle, so you can experiment with that. I have placed myself on this pillow so that right about now if you're a person who wears a bra, you will know this as the bra strap zone, but it is the middle of your rib cage. That's where I have this pillow ending. And if you're using something firm like a block or a firm pillow like I've got, sometimes higher up the back is more comfortable. If you have something really soft under your back, you might want to go all the way down to the top of the pelvis. I'm going to experiment here for a second, couple breaths, and make sure I like this. I might scooch up a little bit. So what I have with my upper body resembles a fish pose. I don't have my head dropping back, but otherwise it's very similar to a fish pose. And then with my lower body, I have the butterfly. So a little bit of a back bend, a little bit of a hip opener, kind of putting both of our focal points together in one pose. If you chose to lie down on your back without any support under it, it will be mostly focused around your hips, which is also great. Don't worry, we're gonna give your spine plenty of love. And then we'll settle in. Now we're gonna stay with some of our poses tonight for 3 minutes. There'll be some 4-minute poses. We'll have some 5 or 6-minute poses. This first one, we're gonna stay a while, but if it gets tedious, you can always straighten your legs out or adjust the support underneath you. We wanna stay for a minimum of 2 minutes with Yin Yoga because the actual benefit starts to occur at that point. 1.5 minutes in some instances is okay, but 2 minutes is a little bit better. And then beyond that, there are varying little points where you'll feel things really start to soften. But the most important impact we're after is a kind of hydrating effect. So there is a stimulation to the connective tissue to produce a substance to help it hydrate. And this will cause the layers of connective tissue to slip on top of the muscle, slip over each other a little bit easier, which just makes us feel like we move in a more fluid way. So you may not in your life have reached the point where you are feeling sticky But there will come a point potentially where you start to feel that sort of sensation where you're just not moving as smoothly as you used to. And this practice is really good for kind of putting that like easygoing movement back in. And it's the hydrating mechanism that we're after. That's what we're really trying to experience here. Stay with this pose for another 2 minutes. We're pretty close to that. So we're going to stay for about 5 more breaths, which is about 30 seconds, or give or take a bit. So you get to decide what the first thing you're going to change is. Take 1 more breath where you are, and then either change the legs or change whatever you're doing with your upper back. I'm going to do legs first because it'll make it easier for me to roll to the side and scoop my pillow out. Okay, I'm going to use that pillow again, but for now, I'm going to come onto my back and just sort of hang out. I've done a little bit of movement to sort of center myself a little bit more on my mat, but also it feels really nice to do like a little bit of an internal rotation after having the hip in that external point, you know, the kind of abducted, externally rotated position. This feels nice. So, I'm even gonna kind of shake both my arms because I had a little shoulder opener going there as well, with the pillow and my shoulder kind of dropping over the edge. So now I'm just going to pause for a second. I've done a little bit of movement and just feel how that pose impacted the body. My body, your body. You're going to check it out on your end. just notice, is there anything that feels unpleasant? Does anything feel pleasant? Is it mostly just a neutral experience? So that's the first thing that I always check in with. And then I notice, like, if anything feels weird or interesting, not particularly unpleasant, but interesting, then I might check in with those places too, and just see if that shifts, if it, you know, like sometimes I'll feel like a little bit of an effervescent or light sensation. There might be some little, like, slightly tingly sensations. So if it feels like you have like pins and needles, like your body part fell asleep, then when we do the, you know, poses in the future, or if that continues to happen, give yourself a little more support, or even come out of the pose, do a little bit of movement and come back in. We don't really want anything to go numb. If that's not the case, but it's just an unusual sensation, then watch it as you go along. Make sure that there doesn't feel like there's too much intensity. What we're going for with yin, everybody, if you read about this, you're going to hear about the edge. You want to be at the edge. The edge is where you feel it versus when you don't, right? So as soon as you feel something, whether you call that a stretch or pressure or stress on your tissue, that's the point where you pause. And then as you hold the pose, sometimes the sensation will completely go away, and then you can get a little further in, remove some of the props, move the body a little bit so that you adjust for a slightly more sensation. You don't want to take yourself to the point where you can't stand it anymore. That's way past the edge of the cliff. And that's the point where we could really do damage to our tissue. We're really going for that really gentle point. And then we sustain that pressure. And that's where we're going to get the real benefit from the practice and hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls. Okay, so that being said, we're laying on our back and we're going to take a twist. Now there's two things that are going to be impacted: our spine, and then the body parts attached to the spine. In my case, my hip and my shoulder are going to be impacted. For some people, you may not feel one of those two, okay? So pick your legs up and you can give yourself just a little rock on your back, and then decide on a direction. You can go left or right first and bring your legs over. So now the spine is in a twist. If your shoulder on the opposite side, so my legs went to the right, my left shoulder comes off the ground at all, and mine is just barely off the ground, then you can add some support under your legs so that that shoulder will stay put. And mostly what we want the upper back to do is relax. There's going to be, for me, a stretch through the pectoralis muscle. So there's a big pec muscle that attaches down the center of the breastbone. It goes all the way across the chest and attaches to the arm bone, kind of up under in the armpit area. And that is the muscle that I'm going to feel stretching, especially if I reach my arm out. If that muscle is tight for you, it can cause, if you stretch it, and you start to feel any kind of numbness or tingling or anything in your fingers or down your neck, readjust your arm. This is a sensitive, the area of the shoulder and the neck can be sensitive to pressure. Okay, and then the outer hip might have a little bit of sensation. And for me, wrapping one leg over the other will help emphasize that sort of outer hip, kind of the glutes that are on this side, external hip rotators, some other little points along the way. Okay, your head can turn in the direction of the twist. You can leave your head neutral with your upper back, or turn it against the twist the opposite direction, and you can decide which one you like better. For me, I almost always like leaning or turning into the twist or neutral more than the other, but occasionally, apparently some of my tiny helpers are helping themselves to all sorts of things. I apologize for the crashing sounds, and I am going to do nothing about it at this moment. So we're going to hang out here for about 4 minutes, or let's say 3 more minutes. We've been here a minute already. Yes, I heard your crashing noise. Hi, how are you? Hello there, how are you? Hi. we're staying here for just shy of 1 more minute, yogis. All right, yogis, take 2 more breaths. And again, we're going to come back to the center, and you can move whichever part you want first. I'm going to move my head first. And then I'm going to bring my legs back. Oh, starting with that top leg. Oh. So I'm going to do like the barest little bit of movement. It's just as I kind of straighten out the legs. And then hang out for just a second. And notice how things unfurl. Almost always when I do a pose that is one side, right? So went to the right, but not to the left yet. I can feel an asymmetry in the body. And I think that's pretty weird and interesting. So I like to check it out. Notice for yourself, is there any little asymmetry for you as well? Does one leg feel a little longer or a little softer around the hip? These are the kinds of sensations that I'm talking about, where there's not a huge change, like visibly, but you can feel how ease is kind of invited into the body. There's a little bit less pressure being placed on the joints because of this delicious, all yoga does it, but Yin just really emphasizes it. Okay, I'm going to spin around because it'll be easier for me to keep my eye on the timer, but you guys could probably just roll your legs over the other way when you're ready. Oh. Okay, so again, the trick is you get your, I'm going to give myself this little back massage because it's delicious. And then you take your legs over the other way. So I'm going to my left now. I went to the right last time. And just make sure your upper back stays on the floor. And then you can adjust the legs, whether you wrap one around the other or you stack them up, or one straightens out and the other one bends, whatever you like. Oh. Oh. And then decide how you're going to turn your head and whether the arm is going to have a particular shape on that other side. And then we settle in. We'll stay for a few minutes. One of the things I think that it can be most challenging about practice that works this slowly is like, what is my brain doing while my body is trying to relax? And so, if you catch yourself sort of leaning into the future, and the way that our mind leans into the future is there's a couple of symptoms, if that's the right word. So you might start to wonder, am I wasting my time? And that's always the way our brain leans forward into the future. It's worried about time. Time is a construct. It doesn't actually exist. There's only the moment that we're in, each moment as it unfurls, really, in reality. So
this notion of like what the future is going to be like is mostly imaginary. But our mind loves to lean into that. So it might start like planning for something that's not happening right now. It might make lists of things that we want to get or have or whatever. So it might start spinning little stories, little fantasy scenarios. Those are all the things that kind of the mind leans into the future to think of. And people who are prone to anxious states, like your girl here, tend to spend more time in the future imaginings. Then we have also the mind will lean backward into the past, and the way that can manifest is everything from like, 70s TV commercial jingles that get stuck in your head, or songs that get stuck in your head, movie scenes, TV, dreams, memories, anything where we sort of get nostalgic or we get kind of pulled back into the past, that's leaning backwards. So the point that we're trying to arrive at and stay at, the place that's called yoga, if we go to some of the ancient texts, yoga is actually staying present right in the moment. That's the state known as yoga. All of the other stuff that we're doing, all these poses, are tools to give us something to notice. So that we can like, oh, look at that. That's interesting. That's happening right now. So we're going to be here for just a little tiny bit less than a minute more. But just see if you could stay really present right here, right now. Your mind will probably wander off. Mine always does. We'll just stay here for about 4 more breaths. Okay, so take 1 more breath, and then we're going to come back to the center. Oh, I got a blanket jammed in there. Oh. And then once we get to the middle, we'll just take a moment. Oh, again, you might want to do some movement. You might want to do just a moment of stillness where there's nothing tugging on your body, and sort of see where it landed. Now, essentially, all we're going to do is flip over and prop ourselves up for a Sphinx. But if you want, before you get to that, and I'm not going to go right away, I'm going to give myself about 3 more breaths or so. But if you want to, before you lay down or get into the Sphinx pose, you could do some cat-cow shapes. And you might want like a blanket or a folded towel, because there are ways you can kind of modify the Sphinx pose that those can be helpful for. Okay. So if you can imagine in your head the Sphinx, which is the statue in Egypt where there's a lion with a human face. And it's sort of propped up, it's laying on all 4s, but in our case, we're just going to emulate the top part. So it's kind of got its little paws out front, right? So that's the part we're going to do, is we're going to put our paws up front. And the way that you can best, at least for me, the best way to anchor in the shoulder is to bring the elbow slightly further in than shoulder distance and slightly forward of the shoulder. And that point right there gives me the least amount of like neck pressure. If my elbows are under my shoulders, there's this tendency for them to want to collapse, or I have to hold them really rigidly and use more muscular energy. If my elbows are too far apart, it feels kind of like it collapses into my neck. So that's the point that's best for me. Now, that being said, this might be too much for your low back. So you can come down into a crocodile, which if you can kind of picture how crocodiles lay like under the water and just like the little ridges on their back and their eyeballs are poking up above the top of the water line. That's sort of the idea, is we're pretty close to flat, but just like a little bit poking up. Now, one way to modify your crocodile, so it's somewhere in between the Sphinx and the crocodile, is to take a folded blanket or a pillow and put your crocodile up a notch. So it just gives you like a tiny bit more, and that's really lovely. I really appreciate that option. You can also do your Sphinx like that, which then takes your Sphinx like a little bit towards the last possibility, which is the seal, where you prop up on your straight arms. And for me, just the best way to get the shoulder as relaxed as possible is what you're aiming for. Now that's more than my back needs. And generally speaking, the Sphinx is plenty. So I'm gonna hang out with that. We're gonna stay for 2 minutes, and then we'll do a little half frog on each side. You can sort of build up like a little support for your forehead if you want. Sometimes I do the pose I did when I was a kid. I called it watching TV, where I put my hands up and rest my chin in my hands, or rest my forehead on my hands. That's nice. So you can certainly do that. And this pose is a back bend, so we're getting a little bit of pressure in the spine and that little tiny bit of compression. We're going for like the most barest hint of compression. That can actually help sort of stimulate bone growth. So the lumbar spine is really vulnerable to bone loss. So it can be helpful, but again, if we have discs that are problematic, we definitely don't want to be pushy. And we don't really want to be pushy with like any any pose that we do. A pose done one time is not going to create a whole structure. That's like doing this pose regularly over a period of months and years is where that bone growth is going to occur, not in pressurizing it as much as we can one time. So we're being kind. You know, that's what we're aiming for, kindness, yogis. So we'll do 2 more breaths here, and then we'll add a half of a frog to our world here. Now, the frog just means we're going to position the legs sort of like a frog. So I'm going to roll to my left and bring my right leg up. And I'm just going to bring it up so it looks like a little frog leg, right? And then I'm going to see if I can roll my pelvis back flat. And for some of us, that will not be a problem. We're pretty close to flat. But for some of us, we're going to be laying on our side, which is fine. So you're going to adjust your body, use props to give you support so that you can hang out with your hip in this position with a minimum amount of intensity, like just right. And this is not a high stretch sensation pose. It's more of a like deep muscle pose. So deep in the hip, external hip rotators, deep in the groins, deep in the attachments all around the hip socket. So that does not have a lot of sensation. There's not a lot of nerve endings there. So we're not going to feel a lot. So don't be too pushy, because the impact is going to be there and we'll feel it when we're done. But we don't want to be really pushy while we're holding it. So hang out. We'll stay for about 3 more minutes. And I've given myself like some pillows and stuff. I'm making myself comfy. I highly recommend it, yogis. If you need a little extra support under your knee, do that. This leg you can do anything you want with. You can even reach back and grab hold of that foot if you wanted to. I'm mostly just kind of let this leg hang out. But every now and then it feels really nice to bring the heel in a little bit towards my buttock and just give the quads a little love on that side. Mostly for me, my left side is about letting my hip flexors relax. So the bent knee just helps give that emphasis a little bit. We've got 1 minute left here. 2 more breaths for your yogis. Now, to come out of this pose, take 1 more breath. And then we're going to roll a little bit again towards the side that is not currently in the frog shape. And we'll straighten the frog leg out. And then you can just lay steady or prop back up into the Sphinx if you like. Feel that hip compared to the other hip. Just notice if any change has occurred. If there's any sense of softening, or if it feels crummy. If it feels crummy, then you're going to want to back off a little bit on the second side. If it feels really pleasant, mine feels really pleasant and soft and very easygoing. So I'm going to mostly do the same thing on the other side, recognizing that we're asymmetrical beings and you might need slightly different approach on either side. But when you're ready, you can bring yourself into the frog on the opposite side. And my left hip is usually my easygoing hip, but tonight it's feeling a little sensitive, so I'm just adjusting my pose to that sensitivity. And leaning a little more into my right side for now. And then that's, you know, you kind of gently guide yourself towards a place where you can let go and relax. And then if the pose shifts, you change your body shape a little bit. You just adjust a little bit here and there. That's why it's really helpful to stay present with your pose and not think about other stuff. So that you can actually be here for it. So we'll stay a while. Nice deep breaths, yogis. We're just a little past the halfway mark here. Yogis. We got about 5 breaths left. 4 or 5. So one more big breath. And then we're gonna gently ease our way out of that guy. And we're gonna, from here, we're gonna wind up in a seated position. Just take your time. Sometimes a little child's pose feels really nice after all that sphinxiness. You're gonna hang out there. You can do some movement, whatever you like. Now, if you need a little bit more time, take the time you need so that you can wind up in a seated position in a way that works best for you. We're gonna do a little series of 3 poses, and then on one side, and then we'll do a little series of 3 poses on the other side. We're gonna start with the square or a shoelace. You can do this pose laying on your back if you like. Or you can reserve the laying on your back for the end, which is where we're gonna do a swan pose. So you can either put your knees on top of each other, you can put your shins on top of each other, you can sit cross-legged with your legs as close together as possible, or you can kind of hybridize to create something along that line. So I use a block, I bring my legs into as close to a square as I can. It helps me to have my foot off of my poor little tender inner thigh. And I also like to fill in the empty space between my knee and my ankle, just to give a little extra support there. And then you can sit up tall, even lean back a little bit. For some of us, that's gonna be enough sensation on the outer hips. We don't need more. Some people will like sitting straight up, and then some folks will wanna lean forward and even maybe lay on their legs or put the elbows on the floor. And that, my friends, is entirely up to you. Take whatever time you need to get yourself settled in. And these are spicy poses. We're gonna hold each of these for 4 minutes. But if they are too spicy, you can let them go a little early. I'll give you that last minute warning. So you can decide, I'm getting out of there. Trying to give myself a little place to act like an armrest.
So we're about halfway through here at this point. We're creeping up on that last minute. So this is a good chance for you to kind of check in, see, has it softened? Is the pose a little bit nicer feeling? Has it gotten a little pushier? If it's gotten pushier, maybe the answer would be to leave a little bit early or back off a little bit. If it's softened, then let yourself relax a little bit more deeply or even lean into it a little bit more. It's our last minute here. Okay, so we're gonna take a really big breath. Let go with a big deep sigh. And then inhale or hold your abs in and come up. I like to come up on the inhale, but some people like to come up with that exhale really dialed in. Okay, now the top leg is gonna come out like a V. So we're gonna take that out. And then the leg that's on the bottom, you can bring that all the way over, or you can leave it kind of where it was, or you can add a little adjustment to it as you need. So we're gonna use this as an opportunity to side bend. So I'm gonna put a little bit of support under my knee on either side, and then bend sideways towards this leg that's long. Now, I got right into my habits. My toes were up, my knee was bent, like engaging all the leg muscles. Now I need to remind myself we're doing yin, so everything's gonna go a little bit soft. I can certainly rest my elbow on my thigh, my head in my hand. I can take this spare arm and bring it overhead, wrap it around behind, or just let it relax. I'm probably inclined to let it relax. You can also sort of build up like a little structure to rest your elbow on if you like. So for me, sometimes the neck is where things get sensitive. So just creating an opportunity for my head to rest in slightly different positions as we hold on here will give me, an opportunity to sort of stretch the side of my neck in a reasonable way and a way that's pleasant. And then of course my spine is bending sideways, so I'm from the hip up all the way to my skull. Everything's arcing over to one side. And then the side on the bottom, just be mindful of that and be mindful of your lower back here. Those are areas that can be sensitive. Not too pushy, just the right amount to feel something.
last minute here. All right, yogis, we're going to take 2 more breaths. Now, again, I'm going to hold the second breath in and come all the way up. You might want to come up on an exhale, see if you like which one better. Like, I always like coming out of the yin poses on an inhale. It sort of feels like it creates a little muscular support. Oh. And I've been hanging out so passively that it feels nice. Okay, last pose in this sequence on this side is our swan. So I'm going to keep this leg bent. I'm going to turn a little bit to my side because I don't have room behind me quite enough to straighten out my other leg. But swan, you might know as the pigeon a little bit better. So similar shape, but in a much more relaxed approach. So you can be more upright, you can relax down. I'm going to kind of go for somewhere in between and sort of sphinx the top part and let the bottom half settle in. Now your foot can be in close against your hip. For me, it has to be a little wider because my knee doesn't accommodate that bend. But if yours does, you can bring your foot right on in against your thigh. So whatever's going to work best for your hip and your leg. Halfway there, yogis, wherever there is, but we're halfway through this hold. That gives you any helpful landmarks. All right, yogis. We're going to take a couple more deep breaths here. Now we're going to come out really slow. And the way that I come out of this is I just lean this thing over and then, bring that back leg around nice and easy. And then we'll take a moment to just, pause. You can move. If you want to do some dance, you can do that. You can do, like, I love a little kind of jiggly, shimmy movement, kind of. That's my favorite. Just feels really good in the joints when you stop. Just, everything relaxes. So you can do any movement that you like. Now we have to repeat those same 3 poses on the other side, and that's what we're going to be up to next. But we'll give it like another 30 or 40 seconds or so. As a team, as a unit. And then if you need longer, you take longer. That's your pose, baby. It's your pose. All right. Now I had my left leg on top last time, so my right leg is going on top this time. So I'm gonna set myself up for my square pose. Of course, if you did the one where your knees are on top, that's generally referred to as the shoelace in the yin world. Then you'll do the shoelace. And for me, it's like, woo, it's like extra because I just finished that long journey into the into the swan. Like that hip is pretty sensitive, so I'm gonna lean back a little, let it like gently soften. If you want to do this pose on your back, you could do that, right? Or save it till the end. But there's no reason for me to go crazy right here. Let yourself sink in, breathe. We're halfway, yogis. We're in that last minute, which again might be the point where you're like, this is the right time for me to come out. You can come out and give yourself a little bit of movement. And then catch us back up with the next pose.
For me, it's like finally good. So it's really only about 5 more breaths, so I'm gonna stay put. All right, I'm gonna inhale my way up, lean back, ooh, take that leg off of there, and then I'm gonna create my support structure. And I like a nice wide pose, so I don't worry about my foot going anywhere in particular, but again, you can adjust as you like. And you can adjust, like you can have the arm that's sort of over the top in whatever position you like. I left mine really relaxed last time, and I'm gonna go for that again. I'm also gonna go for this little bit of head support so that I can slowly rotate my head along the way through a whole range of motion. So I get kind of the whole bevy of muscles along the neck. For myself at least, my neck muscles don't need nearly as long in these poses as my hips do to feel the same amount of release. So a few breaths really with each little tiny muscle is generally enough to give me a sense of a little bit more relief along the neck. It's a very sensitive, very innervated area, y'all. So be kind. Plenty of time. Again, be kind to this area in your low back, both on the curled up side and on the longer side. These little muscles need attention, and in many ways they crave this kind of a stretch, but not aggressively. Be really sweet to your low back. Add all the support you might need. Already halfway through our pose. A little beyond. Just have a wee bit longer here, but if you've had enough, you can certainly come out at this point. going to take a nice deep breath. Let go with a sigh. And then inhale or come up on your exhale, whichever you like better. And then this is going to take us into our swan on the other side. So I'm just going to organize and then swing it around. And again, you could do this pose on your back if you didn't already do one on your back. Yogis, we're about halfway through here. All right, yogis, we're almost there. We're going to take about 4 more breaths.
Now I'm going to use this last breath as kind of my way out. So nice big inhale. And then as I exhale, I'm going to swing my leg around. Oh. Now. Oh, goodness. Oh. So, I'm going to give myself just a little bit of like jiggle time, but mostly we're heading into Shavasana here. So I'm going to put my pillow down so I have something to put my legs over. Oh. And then I'm going to use my blanket as a pillow once I get myself all the way down. And you can set your final relaxation up any way you want. If you want to put your legs up on a wall or over the edge of the couch or up on your bed, you can do that, or it depends on what room you're in, but you can lie down with no support underneath your body. If you ever have trouble with your low back when you lay on the floor, put something under your legs. It'll make a world of difference. And that you can just lie down. It's your preference. But give yourself a chance to have no pressure at all. Like one pose, even if you don't stay the whole time, give yourself a little bit of time to just find that sort of no pressure on the body, or as little as possible. So that's our last place, right? So this allows all that work that we've been doing, all this kind of pressurizing and squishing of our tissue and holding all these shapes. This allows all that fluid to start to kind of flow and the body to start to hydrate. So we get up off the floor, we feel like we move a little smoother. That's the goal anyway. The last pose is kind of important on that level. Oh. So as best you can, let yourself relax completely. Always blows my mind how fast time goes by when you lay in Shavasana compared to any of the other poses. But take a moment just to notice your breath again. Take a nice big breath all the way to your tiptoes. let it go with a sigh. And then as you're ready, you can wiggle and stretch. Oh, I like to do both wrist and ankles and fingers and toes. And then everything else. And take your time. You might even, if you're doing this at night, like we are at this point, you could maybe just go kind of slip into a nice comfy bed, read for a while. If you have stuff to do, just keep it low key so you kind of get to stay with this vibe for a little bit anyway. Oh. So thank you so much for joining me. We're going to take a nice big breath together. And a big deep sigh. Namaste.